I remember very much saying, like, thinking to myself at 8 years old, this is not the America I thought I was from and I represented. Now, granted, like I'd come more from the Northeast. That was more of my experience. Not to say that there's not that there, but like the South is a very different experience than West Coast, than Pacific Northwest. And, so that's the part of the nature of things.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back. Or maybe it's your first time with us. Welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. This is the show where I get the privilege, honestly, it's just an honor, to have these weekly conversations with some of the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers, as I call them, across all sectors and segments of society and industry, as we come together to do two things, really. Try to understand how we can best navigate the complex world that we live in from this particular point of view today. And then also, hopefully, idealistically, by the end of this, maybe try and figure out ways that we can understand one another and understand the areas that our guests obsess about, so that we can leave the world a little bit better than we found it. Today, I'm super excited to be welcoming a friend from here in Los Angeles, Southern California, although it's hard to pin her down because she's kind of constantly always on the move somewhere. Sarah Dandashy, the infamous Ask A Concierge online. She's a luxury hospitality and travel expert, podcast host, TV host, best-selling author. Literally, if I put all the things in her just intro statement that she does, I would not even have to read a bio, but I'm going to read a bio about her to tell you a little bit more about her from my point of view before we welcome her into the show today. To me, Sarah is so much more than just a hospitality and travel expert. She's really an explorer, in many ways, as I view her, right? Maybe one of the original nomads before such things were hip and trendy. She's an incredible daughter, a friend, a master storyteller, and a person whose career and life has been built around one simple but really powerful idea, which is making people feel special. She greets life with this infectious smile and can-do attitude every day. And after spending more than 15 years as a top concierge at some of the world's most prestigious hotels, she earned recognition as the best young concierge in the world at one point in her life. But rather than staying behind the desk, so to speak, she transformed that expertise into this global media platform that now reaches hundreds of thousands of travelers and hospitality professionals. She's in that process also then kind of transformed her life, right? This love of faraway destinations and amazing experiences into this life as an entrepreneurial storyteller, as the founder of Ask A Concierge, as a TEDx speaker, best-selling author, television personality, all these things we've talked about, multiple popular podcasts in different sectors and segments. But what I'm really excited for us to talk about today, aside from some current events, is this idea that she hits on in almost everything that she does in her work, right? Where she really explores exceptional service, right? And authentic human connection. Unforgettable experiences that teach us about ourselves, about leadership, about the services industry. And she joins us today to help us understand kind of this shifting business and cultural reality in hospitality that we experience. But also, I'm going to hopefully try and see if we can't take that conversation into understanding how in this crazy digital world that we live in, right? Like how we can still use getting out there into it and interacting with each other to create more genuine human connection, which I know she's a huge fan of, the whole idea of genuine human connection. So with that said, Sarah, welcome to the Entrepreneurial Thinkers.
Well, first of all, thank you, Rob. Wow, that was like the best introduction I've ever had. I was just like, wow, that was very well done, sir.
It's easy to do great introductions of really cool people who have lived pretty full lives. So like if you want to hire me to go on the road and introduce you to speaking engagements.
Deal. You can warm up the crowd before I get out there.
I'm your setup man for life. That's awesome. We've got a lot we're going to talk about. I mentioned we'll pull on some kind of current events, the realities of travel in today's economy and all that fun stuff. And then we're going to get into your own nomadic story that I referred to. But first things first, in a world that just honestly seems so stressed out all the time, right? We're all just wound way too tightly. How important is it to travel and relax and connect with others in whatever ways people can afford to? Because for everybody, it's different, right? But how important is that today?
It's so important. So first of all, I always like to say travel is a mindset because I think so many people like to oh, but it's like too expensive and this and that. But it's like, there's so many different ways that you can travel. You can even play tourist in your own backyard for a day. And so I feel like so often people overlook that, but it's important because it takes you out of your routine. It's funny because just before hopping on this call, I was working with my assistant. We're working on some new content. And one of the part of it was around this idea of it's like, it's funny how when you come back from vacation and people say like, welcome back to the real world, when you're like, maybe I was actually experiencing the real world while I was out there. And so it's this beautiful thing with travel is that like it takes us out of our routine and the mundane and just takes us out of all that stuff that is like so close to you, the proximity of it. It's hard for you to even get a perspective of what's happening around you. And so travel is great because not only is it healthy to unplug, to get off your phone, but it gives you perspective as far as what's going on in your life, be it a job, relationships, friendships, your children, whatever it is. And it gives you that chance to create those moments and those memories. So for me, travel is just so much, it's so important to life, but it's something that really can be done at any sort of price point. You just have to have the right mindset and attitude around it. And a lot of that comes down to curiosity. So yeah.
100%. Man, that's so encouraging, right? Because I think I love your idea. We live in such this Instagram society, right? And so everybody kind of is looking at what somebody else does and how they experience it. And then they think like, oh, I'm not going to bother to travel if I can't travel like Sarah travels, right? Like, which would be absurd even on another level because you're doing it for work, right? I mean, like while you occasionally do it for fun, like you are also, and you have fun doing your work, but you are doing it for work, right?
Totally.
And the truth is, a perfect example to your point. So you knew this, we talked about it before. It's my birthday tomorrow. I've got a friend from Orange County who's
happy early birthday.
Thank you. Like I've got a friend who's just going to come up here to me in Hollywood to just hang out. So she's taking time off work to just enjoy my birthday with me because I'm like, it's my birthday, so I'm not going to work. And she's like, cool, we can just go hang out and we'll go to lunch at some place that you haven't been to lunch in a while. And just changing that scenery and that feeling in our own city is kind of a mini travel. It's like a little staycation, whatever we call it. Right?
Yeah. And I love that because there's so many, I mean, how often we all get into our routines and then next thing you know, you're like, wait a second. Oh, there's a new coffee shop that's like 3 blocks further than where I would normally go. Or, oh, we always have dinner in this part of town. What about doing dinner in another part of town? And it just, those little tweaks can just do something to just kind of like liven you up a little bit.
Yeah, no, totally agree. A great encouragement for anybody listening. All right. So I have some of these questions that were kind of bubbling inside of me over the last couple of months as we watched the world kind of unspool from itself in some ways. So I want to turn the clock back a little bit though. I have not traveled dramatically. I've traveled dramatically less, I should say, since the pandemic than I did before. And so I'm curious, like, again, on the front lines as you are, like, how has the world of travel and the travel industry changed since the pandemic?
So first of all, I find it interesting that your comment because I flipped it. Since the pandemic, I've traveled way more than I was traveling before that. But it's also kind of like the nature of my work and what I do. But, I mean, I think like in general, like since the pandemic, I think we can all agree to this is that people really, it underlined the value and the appreciation for travel and experiences. Before we were teetering on the, experiences versus things. I mean, I remember I even did it like on a TV segment that December on Kelly Clarkson right before the
2019.
Pandemic happened.
Wow. Goodness.
And then now it's not just a slogan. It's really how people are living their lives. They understand this idea of like, if not now, when? And they put emphasis on it. And again, I feel like also travel's become just even in like the last decade, more accessible than ever. That you have so many different ways to travel. Like even with, Airbnb and short-term rentals, like there are different ways for people to stay, whether you're big families and you're trying to stay all together or whether you're looking for something that's more economical, a longer stay, all of that. And so it's been really fascinating because the pandemic really underlined that travel is not going anywhere. Yeah. People want that freedom. In fact, I'd even argue that might even be the new American dream is not necessarily like, the house with the white picket fence, but instead of that, it's actual like geographical freedom. And I think that that's a big part of
Interesting.
like who we are and what we're geared towards and what we're seeking out. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons that go into it. We can probably dive into that later, but travel is just like continuing to grow and so many different ways to do it and people finding the really personal aspects of it. And now it's leaning even more into experiential as people are like wanting to get off of their phones more and connect a bit more, as we've seen sort of like the height of social media really kind of in 2022, 2023. And now it's kind of like coming back down, obviously still very prevalent, but as far as like more and more people are now logging off. And so they're really kind of seeking this like, okay, how do we connect in real life again and get that sort of that real community back? So it's interesting to see.
You would appreciate this little anecdotal story. My niece, who just graduated high school down Orange County, and she'll be starting at UCLA in the fall. She's traveled with her family, right? Like up to this point, very normal, 18 years old. But to your point, the kids, her era, like, and then her little sister who's 15, like they're barely on social media. Like they use, so, you know, Gen Alpha and your Gen Z and Gen Alpha, right? And they use like stories to like communicate, but that's about it. There are no posts on the grid. There's none of that. They're not on like multiple platforms anymore, basically eschewing all that stuff. But fun side story that you'll appreciate is, so there was a school trip that was organized for like graduating kids. And so she is for the first time in her life traveling by herself and they are in Europe. And it's like her and a group of kids from her high school. Her boyfriend happens to be part of the group and then like a best friend. And so they're literally like, I'm watching and they're 18 so they can all drink in Europe, right? In the different countries, depending on where they are. And she's like just messaging me, Uncle Rob, oh my God, like this, every stop along the way is like the best place she's ever encountered in Earth compared to the last stop, right? And all compared to where her life in South Orange County. And
I love that.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, this is great. I'm glad you're doing this before you start school because you'll definitely now want to probably study abroad, and go back again and go someplace maybe in a more concentrated way that you'll have perspective. And
totally.
So, yeah. And eschewing the social media, like basically literally only she'll send me pictures that she'll take, but they're not really posts. They're not showing up anywhere on social media, which is fascinating. So,
well, and I will say this, like, and I love that you said that because it reminds me of something, another thought that I've just been kind of percolating over the past couple of weeks. But I love how she's reaching out to you. She's like, this is so cool. It's the best day ever, the best place ever. And it's like, and it's cute, right? And it's great to see. Yes. And it's interesting because I have aspects of that in my personality. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And sometimes I'll be like, do people get sick of me saying that? And then I'm like, you know what?
Doesn't
Forget
matter.
that. Because what is that indicative of? That's indicative of being so present and in the moment. And like throwing away maybe preconceived notions. And it's like, wouldn't we all love to constantly be so tickled and be like, this is the best ever. Like we should always be experiencing
What's that old, someone who even knows who it's attributed to anymore, that phrase about, you know, don't design the life that you have to like aspire to the weekend, but design the life that like the Monday through Friday is the life that you want to have.
Exactly.
Right?
Totally.
So you feel that giddy about like we do about Los Angeles sometimes. All right. So you get asked for a lot of advice. You have a lot of like off the record conversations with executives in the industry. There's a little bit of a kind of a businessy follow up to that. So have you seen then like hoteliers or airlines or travel companies, like, are they adjusting? Are they like deepening their investment in these experiential types of realities, this post-pandemic reality? Were they initially kind of pulling back out of the devastation economically that happened because of the pandemic? And like, where is it at now from a business industry standpoint?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Well, you can't even talk about that without even talking about like the current state of the economy, which is obviously inflated, not just domestically, but internationally. And I feel I always like to underline that because it's all too often that we in the United States are like, oh, woe is me, because we're just focusing on here. But then we have to kind of take a step back and be like, hey, everybody's in this together. And I think that underlines the importance of the global world that we live in. And so we can't be insulated because that's just not the nature of like how we exist on this planet. That being said, so they call it this like K-shaped economy. This is like the big like term or the term like of, I'd say like the first 2 quarters of 2026, but definitely doubling down on premium people like that. Even with economic uncertainty, the people that are spending a lot on travel, they're continuing to spend a lot. And those are the type of individuals that, you know, even with the economy the way that it is, they're not really worried about gas prices. They're not really
Right.
worried about jet fuel prices.
Top 10% type people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're spending, and arguably they're even spending more. And it's fine. And so it's interesting because as hotels and different brands and destinations tend to raise prices, they're not necessarily getting the pushback on the price. Just with that, they have slightly higher expectations. And for a little bit after the pandemic, there was a little bit of a challenge where it's like people were paying more and they were okay paying more, but they were like, hey, we need to make sure that what we're paying for is like what we're actually getting.
Okay.
So I think we're kind of like, we're shortening that gap, which is great. But then there is also this like extended stay aspect of like the hotels and the travel space, and that, you know, again, more people not necessarily having to work from the office, and they can have a different way of traveling, be it a digital nomad or whatever that is. Obviously, there's still a tug of war, and there is a big call to like going back to the office, but
Sure.
there are still a lot of people that have a little bit more of that flexibility. So you are seeing these longer term, these longer stays, these more economical stays that people are really opting for.
Industry leaders, some of these companies are investing in those types of, not necessarily new categories, but like, let's expand in those areas.
Totally. And they're doing really well. So then when you're looking at the pipeline as far as like what they're building, the types of properties, the types of rooms, keys, all of that, those are kind of like the two areas that they're really doubling down on, as far as moving ahead.
And to your point, I was going to ask you later, but I'll ask you now, since you get great podcast guest / host, you're perfect with the segues, right? So are they viewing, is the industry or, you know, these executives, are they viewing all of kind of today's current instability, like our political instability, the conflicts in the Middle East, which I literally wrote the script to say like the war in the Middle East, which just ended, which technically I don't think it did just end. So,
correct.
Right. So I think it's on again as of this afternoon. But like, so are they looking at all of those things, like fuel prices up because of those things? Are they looking at all of that as just kind of temporary and passing, or? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yes, it's temporary, but the challenge is there's no quick bounce back,
right?
And that's the biggest thing. And then also, it's changing the complete like it's changing actual travel patterns. For example, coming into 2026, the Middle East, like Dubai, like Saudi Arabia, was like, this is the new hotspot of the world. They've been building up to it. They've been doing a fantastic job, and now, you know, obviously a lot of airlines pulled out. People have had to literally reroute not only their flights, but their actual travel destinations of where they're going to. Similarly, you also have the United States, which has had a very bad PR and reputation for the past year and a half, for a lot of different reasons. And then you've got a lot of
people running our house are not the best hosts.
Yes, correct. Exactly. And so even though maybe the day to day on the ground may not be that different, perception is certainly not the best that's out there. So you've got a lot of people from different countries that are like, we're just going to boycott altogether. And so what is this doing then to travelers? Is they're now like, well, they still want to travel. So they're going to like, I'm just going to travel elsewhere. So whether they're traveling to Southeast Asia, or whether they're like, I'm going to go to South America or that. So it's been interesting is that travel isn't necessarily slowing down. These people are just choosing to go elsewhere. So it'll be curious as far as the long term, what that the actual play will be. But
I like you would have to imagine, right? I mean, I'm not going to, this is my words, by the way. I'm not putting any of these words in your mouth on your behalf, right? Like January of 2029, hypothetically, like there could be a huge 2029 could be an incredible travel year for the US for incoming visitors.
I mean, I'd like to hope before, but you know, that's a conversation for another day.
Yes, exactly.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Shore Capital. In today's venture capital world, it's not just about cash. It's about relationships. Capital is harder to find, limited investors have fewer managers that they can trust, and the industry is just filled with far too much hype. Shore Capital is an early-stage venture fund investing in the world's most ruthlessly iterative founders, helping its limited partners to find founders who are solving the world's most dynamic problems, teams that excel in mastering the idea maze, teams moving with a rapid, iterative velocity and demonstrating radical resourcefulness. Shore Capital doesn't just write checks, though. They become fractional co-founders when needed, offering strategic support,
high leverage relationship development, and a deep commitment to the long-term success of their portfolio companies. If you are a ruthlessly iterative founder with a bold vision or a limited investor seeking sustained access to the brightest big thinkers of our time, Shore Capital wants to meet you. So visit shorecapital.notion.site to learn more. Sweet, January 2029. But it's funny though, to this point, like, and I'm a huge soccer fan, so I've been just absolutely immersed in my television screen and in some local watch parties watching the World Cup right now. And that was one of those, like, clearly from the World Cup soccer competition on the pitch, as well as like attendance at the matches, it's a roaring success. Like it's superseding everything that anybody who was a naysayer was against it. But I imagine, to your point a minute ago about how travel patterns shift, I imagine what we might be seeing, and we probably won't know this for years until they analyze the data, is we're seeing like a lot of Americans travel inside of the country who probably have like ethnic origins back in their home countries and they're rooting for Brazil or whatever, but they're showing up in the stadiums as Brazilians, but there probably are fewer Brazilians coming from Brazil this year than there might have been.
And I love that you asked this because I actually just recorded, I do the Skiff Daily Briefing.
Yep.
So I just recorded that for tomorrow. And new data is in. The first week of the World Cup is out. So data is in. So fascinating is, so obviously we know international travelers coming in, it's thin. That's definitely thin.
Right.
Also the numbers as far as what hotels were expecting, that also was below. But what we've found is that a lot of these properties are now at 85, 100%. So they're doing really well.
They just didn't get those bookings in advance from other countries that they thought.
Exactly. They didn't get it in advance. And where they're not sold out, people are just simply paying more. So they're doing well with the numbers, but it's super last minute. And what they're doing is they're coming for the match. So maybe the night before, the day of, but they're not coming for a vacation. So, which absolutely makes sense. Now, what will be the turning point? And by the way, I'm no major sports expert, but I feel like I've had to like put on my hat for this to really kind of like
everybody
understand the
kind of
does. I know, totally. But once we kind of get to like the start of like the playoffs and really start narrowing down
the knockout round.
The knockout round. That's what it is. Thank you. I just read it. Knockout round. Thank you.
We got like 8-9 more days. We're good.
Yeah, exactly. So once we get to the, it's like June.
There's a lot of matches. This is the biggest. This is the biggest World Cup in history in that they literally expanded the field of teams. So it went from 32 to 48.
So once we get to this knockout round, that could change everything, especially depending on who's playing, whether it's like Messi or, all of that.
So you could see, we could see maybe like, again, last minute influx of the 10%ers from these foreign countries who then come for the more meaningful matches.
And it's fascinating because like I'm in the process right now, of helping a client of mine purchase tickets to the finals. And obviously we know that they're outrageously priced, but it's also finding that fine balance of like, okay, obviously there's flexibility on the budget in this particular case to even be having this conversation, but it's like trying to figure out like when it's going to be the best deal as far as availability and price point. And so right now I'm kind of guiding him. Like I'd say like, let's kind of lock something in the next 7 days. Because once we get to that knockout round, then.
No, it's probably right because, but that you cut down the knockout round goes to 32 teams, which is the old number of total teams, right? And by that point, you start to see like who's in it and who's really playing well.
The cream starting to rise to the top.
Yeah, it already started yesterday, but it has been fascinating, right? Because there was this kind of the naysayers, I call them the online shouters, right? Who were like against everything and it's all terrible and we shouldn't be hosting it because we're terrible people, blah, 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 blah. And as you watch it, you're like, but some aspects of this are still coming true. The Scots in particular, who are just rabid soccer fans, football fans, and they have apparently taken over Boston and Providence, right? And like those are like we came from Scotland, and there are like 7,000 of them, right? And so obviously, still there are people that are traveling abroad here for this, and thankfully, not being harassed or turned around at the airports and sent home.
What's been interesting, and I'm sure you've seen a little bit of it, is the number of I'm actually like, I want to do a deeper dive on this because I'm like, who are these people where they've got different Europeans from different countries that are like experiencing the US for the first time.
The German kid on Instagram and TikTok, like Freddie.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's like, part of me is like, well, this is, I love it, like from culturally speaking, because I feel like it's doing a lot for those of Americans in the US that like are kind of getting a breath of fresh air because like, you know, when you're in it, you're like, oh gosh, we could be so much better. And then it's like, oh, but to see somebody's new fresh perspective, I think
turns out Europeans love chicken fingers and fries from Raising Cane's.
Yeah, totally. And like all of that. So I love the cultural like flip that's happening because I think so many of us in the US have been so hard on ourselves and hard on our countries, on our own country, that it's like, okay, to see that somebody's like getting some enjoyment, it's like, okay, like it just adds a little bit of levity at a time that I feel like we desperately need it. And I kind of love it. So whether it's real or not, I think it's doing a fantastic job.
Well, I'm excited to find out that like, not surprising, like professionals like you guys, like you're getting the data, like you're getting the real data from inside the industry, which will be, to those of us on the outside, will be fascinating to see kind of after the fact. Or we just all have to check into the latest Skift podcast episodes to get all these facts.
I mean, it comes out pretty much 4 days a week.
Boom,
so
there we go. It's hard to miss you. All right. So let's segue. Let's talk a little bit just like broader life. I mean, I mentioned it in the intro. You have this incredible life story. By the way, just as an online friend and as someone who himself has enjoyed Father's Day this weekend, like some of the photos and stuff that you posted over the last 4 or 5 days of your family, of your dad, of you when you were little, and your dad. And your dad is a dancing machine. That's like just like that.
I'm a dancing machine for those that know.
So here you've lived this like incredibly eclectic life. Like, so just to give people some context, you grew up born in Jeddah?
No, so I was born in Pennsylvania, so I can actually be president someday.
Okay,
just
nice.
FYI.
We may need that. Born in Pennsylvania, lived in Jeddah, London, New York, LA.
Atlanta. I went to elementary school and high school in Atlanta, so we can't forget that dirty South.
That always gets lost in your bio. Like studied foreign service at Georgetown, which again, the future / diplomat / you're going to run for office someday, right? And so. Like, actually, to that point, right? I mean, maybe in a more traditional sense, that would have been where you would have headed. You would have said, like, I want to satisfy my global nature, my desire for travel by going into the diplomatic service. But instead, you chose this career still in service of others, I like to say. As I was putting this show together, I was thinking, ironically, she still essentially works in service of others. She's just doing it in this way through these industry experiences. So my question to you then is, like, when you look at this global upbringing, did you, like, how young were you when you started to realize that, like, maybe your superpower wasn't just understanding, like, places, but it was understanding people and the cultures?
That's a fantastic question. And I'm going to give you a crazy answer, but pretty freaking young, like at like 7 and 8. And it's interesting. So, so imagine I'm American, but the first, in essence, 7, 8 years of my life, I didn't live in the United States. So I was born here. I grew up with an American mom, but like, so I'm American, but like I wasn't living in the US. So it's like my identity was tied to the idea of what that was. And I always grew up in very multicultural areas and schools and places where like kids spoke different languages and they have different religions. I come from a family that has like different languages and religions. And like, it just was part of how I was raised. And then like coming to the US, and then it was interesting because coming to then Atlanta, which was interesting because, racism was very
for like your teen years in high school. Like
I moved there at 8. So I was basically there from 8 to 18. And I remember being like, wait, the kids kind of sit like segregated, and it not necessarily, maybe not on purpose or whatever. And it was a very weird thing because I remember very much saying, like, thinking to myself at 8 years old, this is not the America I thought I was from and I represented. Now, granted, like I'd come more from the Northeast. That was more of my experience. Not to say that there's not that there, but like the South is a very different experience than West Coast, than Pacific Northwest. And, so that's the part of the nature of things. But I mean, and when I was in 3rd grade, I got a nickname from the teacher that was my nickname was the diplomat. And I
Okay.
was the person that would literally bring everybody together because there
Wow.
was different socioeconomic backgrounds, there were different races. And I would just be like, no, like we're bringing everybody together. And that was always kind of part of me and instilled in me at such a young age, which might seem so weird, but maybe it's because I was the only child and constantly in rooms where I was also able to watch and glean information from seeing other people interact,
Right.
seeing my mom speak Arabic to other people as an American woman with blonde hair and seeing how they respond. I mean, it was crazy. Just 2 weeks ago, I was just in Miami and we get in the car where we get in our Uber and she starts speaking Arabic with the driver and his like jaw dropped down. It was like, oh my gosh.
Right. Yeah.
And it was so, and I mean, she's also still my mom. So of course, like before I used to be embarrassed, like, oh my gosh, mom. But
Right.
like when I saw the joy that she had in having the ability to practice, maybe because she wasn't in an environment that she could practice,
Right.
but also the sheer awe and like how it would bring people together. I'm like, far be it for me to step in, go for it. And so it's so cool to kind of have those constant reminders. But yeah, so to kind of go back, like as far as the education.
From childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. So the education. So for me, I actually always had a passion for film and TV. I am and still a firm believer that pop culture specifically does wonders in bringing people together. You think of the power of music, the power of movies, TV, all of that. Obviously that whole landscape is changing, but it still very much brings people together.
To your point, right? Very, very much like post World War II, like you would have studying at Georgetown, you would have referred to that as soft power.
Oh,
right. For any country, but especially for the United States to essentially spread our cultural belief systems, good or bad.
It was great. And so my major specifically was culture and politics. So it really does tie in together. And so for me, it's all about like understanding the way the system works. But I feel like cultural significance, cultural relevance, cultural inclusion is such a strong way as far as connecting people, because like at the end of the day, we're all human. Like we're just under these man-made constructs as far as like what nations are and like, oh, that's the border. Okay. Cause that's the border, like, is it the border? It's still the land on this planet. So yeah, I don't know. It gets very, very interesting and exciting, but I will say this. I will say that I didn't necessarily choose hospitality. I kind of fell into it. My cousin had gone to Lausanne, so he had gone to hospitality school. While I was going to school at Georgetown, I always worked multiple jobs because I wanted a taste of real life and not just what I was having in the Georgetown experience, which was wonderful, by the way. Yeah. But and so I was working at a restaurant, and then my cousin was like, "Well, why work at this restaurant for $9 an hour when you can work at the Four Seasons for $14?" I'm like, "Oh, I'll be rich."
You're like, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So that's how I got introduced to working in.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Plain Text Capital. You know, investing in Web3 and cryptocurrencies isn't about jumping on the latest trends. It's about understanding where the market is headed and why. Plain Text Capital is a digital asset investment firm focused on long-term strategies backed by deep research, backing the best Web3 companies and protocols, and investing in the newest asset classes of the future. They believe that Web3 crypto will drive digital innovation for decades to come, creating significant value for investors. In fact, their team of highly skilled professionals work with institutions and serious individual investors who want clarity in a space full of hype and noise. So if you're looking to cut through the chaos and invest with purpose, Plain Text Capital brings a disciplined, high-conviction approach to investing. You can learn more and meet the team at plaintextcapital.com.
Of environments. And then when I moved out to Los Angeles, I even still explored. By the way, I was an intern and morning show producer of a top 40 radio station. So I worked in radio also while I was going to college, and was trying to explore some of those type of avenues, and then fell into hotels, was gifted, I would say, really gifted the role of being a concierge, where I'd only lived in Los Angeles 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. And that's not a common first job, in the hotel. You're not giving that to the newbie.
Not at 22 years old, being concierge of a 5-star 5-diamond hotel where people are like, "Hey, I need to get Nobu catering for my private flight." And I'm like, okay. Barely even knowing what Nobu was.
Let me go look all that stuff up now at 22 and I just moved to town. Wow. That's
Exactly.
amazing. All right. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, and we're going to talk more about all this other stuff
Yeah,
that
sure.
makes you up, right? But I'm going to jump ahead again and ask, right? Like, to me, you're an entrepreneur. Now, having said that, 8-year-old you had this premonition about where you were going in your general life. Did you, when you were younger, or even just earlier in your career, did you see yourself winding up in this kind of entrepreneurial path that you've carved out for yourself, or no?
Not totally. It is interesting because I do remember very distinctly being on a plane with my mom at like 7 years old and turning to her. I should actually ask her if she remembers this, but turning to her and being like, I want to live on a plane one day. I know
Okay.
how many flights I do a year. I was like,
you've
Sarah,
come
what
pretty
did you
close.
manifest?
You've
Oh my
come
God.
pretty close to
You're
that.
pretty
Jess.
close. But you know, because like what I've carved out,
Or let me ask it a different way. Sorry to interrupt. Like,
Yeah.
do you consider yourself an entrepreneur, or do you just look at
100%.
yours? Okay, because you are. I mean,
100%.
I'm telling you, you
Yeah.
are.
Well, no, 100%. And it was interesting because I was having a conversation with somebody today who had sent me a message, somebody I've known for a very long time, former concierge, does something else, and was like giving commentary, like, do you ever take time for yourself and this? And I was just like, and it was like, you seem very busy. And I'm just, there's a lot to unpack with that. But my whole thing is, it's like, okay, well, like, before I get my feathers all ruffled from it, I'm like, okay, that comment is coming from somebody else's viewpoint.
100%. And how they live their lifestyle and their choices. Yeah.
And for anybody that knows me, and especially like I would say family members or whatever, like my family members don't even think what I do is unusual because they're like, you've operated at this pace and speed at least since you were 12 years old.
Okay.
I've always had multiple things going on. I've always done that. I had a client of mine refer to it as cycle speed. And it's like my cycle speed is, and I didn't necessarily know how to articulate that before, but it's like, it is what it is. And it's like everybody goes at sort of whether it's a different speed or a different cadence or whatever. I've always had a very strong sense of, I can only do what really is right for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So ever since I was young, even if I try something, I'm like, not it. Like I can't live something that's not authentic to myself.
Yeah. So not just a good corporate worker bee person.
Totally. And now, by the way, like I also did exceptionally great in the hotels that I worked in and the jobs that I had. I mean, I won probably Employee of the Year multiple times. I think I was also very lucky in the sense that I had the people that were over me were like, we're just going to step away and let her go.
Let her do her thing because it's serving the purpose of the job. So everybody's winning, but she's also doing it in a way that maybe we wouldn't have described in the handbook.
Correct. So I think that there's always been that sort of entrepreneurial mindset. And it's fascinating too, because, you know, when you think about it, and it's like, I think all of us can agree to this, is that there is this sort of glamorized notion as far as what being an entrepreneur is.
Yep.
And those that are actual entrepreneurs know that it's not glamorous necessarily.
Yeah,
there's a
lot
lot
of hard work.
No, a lot of hard work. There's a lot of pros, but there's a lot of sacrifices that you have to give to it. And it really simply isn't for everyone. And it's also okay. Being
100%.
an entrepreneur does not make you any better than like if you're a C-suite exec. Like we need all of those people.
Yep.
And that's all right.
It's funny. Although I would argue in the affirmative, and it's the other reason that I really was eager to have you on the show, was that my humble opinion, having now lived inside the thesis of this show for 6 years, is like you are one of the prototypes, as many are, of the 200 and some odd people that have been on the show. Like you're an entrepreneurial thinker. Which I've been using that as a phrase as a part of this show, because I fundamentally, as I say in the show promos, like I fundamentally believe that we all have inside of us, no matter what your job title is or your career path is or your station in life, like I believe we all do have like a little bit of an entrepreneurial thinking DNA inside of us.
Sure.
Many of us just never follow it. Many of us are afraid of it. Many of us never get the encouragement to believe in it.
Totally.
Some of us do, right? And then others of us figure it out when we're 8. That it like doesn't, that I'm different, right? But we don't call it an entrepreneurial thinker. That's again, I would love at some point to like help kids in middle school to understand that like you could be an entrepreneurial thinker. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to become you can become a doctor. but
Totally.
or like a lawyer or a politician, but we want entrepreneurial thinking politicians. We don't want just, right? So,
Well, and I think a couple of things when it comes down to dissecting what that entrepreneurial thinking is. I think it's about having a vision and a conviction. I think that that's the biggest part of it. It can look and be under the guise of so many different things. Like you can, but it's being so true to yourself and what you like think and know to be the path that makes the most sense for that time. And that's part of it. There's also the willingness to say that you were kind of describing, to take a risk. Everybody has different elements of risk that and by the way, I take risks all the time. I'm making some decisions in the next 6 months that scare me. Yeah. And I'm like,
but yet there probably are still levels of risk that you'd be like, that's crazy. I would never why would you make that choice? Right.
Sure.
So everybody has those steps. Gradations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it is all steps. And I think it's like, but to me, it's also, isn't that like that reminder of like, you only have one life. And if not now, when, like who wants
you said that in the very beginning, and you said that in your opening statement. The word curiosity is fundamental to me to this. Like I was, when I was a kid, as the ages you referred to, like I was described as like just being wildly curious. And depending on who was describing it in my family, like that was either a compliment or it was a knock. Right. Yeah. And my mom thought it was a great thing. My dad wasn't so fond of it. Right. And so I grew up with that conflict until I kind of got to a place in life where then I was like, no, this is a strength. Right. Totally. But then as I muddled through like most of normal, like predictable adult life, it wasn't until like mid 40s when I kind of awoke again and went, holy shit, you know what? I think actually the best version of myself was the version of myself between 0 and 16. And now if I could just go back to being kind of my mentality, as you would say, my mindset, that I lived and looked at life as I did up to like 16 and before I started trying to become my dad and trying to please my dad at 18 and blah, 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 blah. Right. Like I was like, that was when I was the happiest. Like, and the most joyful and the most fulfilled and and so now like 46 to now I'm 58 tomorrow, like I've lived that way. And my daughter who's 32 looks at it and goes like, I don't know what you were like when you were a kid, but if this is what you were saying you were like when you were a kid, I am glad that this is how you are.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I think it's funny because I've been seeing this actually on social media, is that actually this is more like in reference to women, but I think it applies to everybody. It's like, it was talking about like women in their 40s are just versions of themselves from 16, but now they just like don't give a shit, funny. You know?
There we go. I'll sign up for that one. Plus,
totally.
I'm a like devout ally and girl dad and all that stuff anyway.
Yeah,
so I'm
but
like,
but it applies to all. It's not necessarily just women. It really is. It's like, and I think that's probably like the beauty of just time. And when people talk about having that sort of that wisdom, it's like you have that, you reprioritize what matters, what you should worry about, what you shouldn't worry about. And you're just like, let's go and just go for it. So
100%. No, I love that. Yeah. Love those insights. In this entrepreneurial journey that you've been on, right? You transitioned yourself out of from behind the desk, as we said before, right? To now kind of bringing the concierge desk to life out here in the digital world. And I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure you were probably one of the pioneers of that kind of idea of talking about these types of things and engaging with people digitally in the space and all that years ago. And I mean, literally, like, we're exaggerating, hundreds of thousands of followers across the different platforms and whatnot. But I'm curious, because this is something you talk about a lot in other things that you've done creatively. How do you bring that one-on-one kind of hotel lobby? We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney & Company. You know, we all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney & Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory. In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney & Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com. That's HaneyCPAs.com to learn how they can support your business's financial journey. into this mass kind of digital media video space without, and still I'll frame it differently, like, and still come across, because this is a compliment, you know this about yourself humbly, but like still come across as like so damn genuinely like authentic and kind and relatable. Like how has that been a learning process for you over the years, or are you're just doing social media the same way you do life?
I'm doing social media the same way I do life, but I think that that's like, so it's interesting because people would be like, oh my gosh, you're such a great concierge. And I would always be like, but I'm not doing anything. I'm just being me. And so when I wrote my first book, because I'm working on my second book, by the way, but when I wrote my first book, Hospitality from Within, I was really kind of like figuring out those pillars. And one of them is like genuine and authentic engagement. And then it's also being present. And I think really at the end of the day, it's just about being present as much as you can, because it's like when you're present, you are operating from a place that people can relate to. You're genuinely interested. You're genuinely invested. It's like your problem is going to be mine because I'm going to help you solve it type thing in a like a service related context.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is all real. And I think that if anything, that's also, it just goes to this reminder, especially in a time where like now there's so much AI generated content and all that, like people are just, what lasts the test of time is that realness, that authenticity, the word that people hate to say, but I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day. It's like, it's that human element. People want to connect with other humans. They don't necessarily want to connect with other robots.
I think I saw a quote, and I went back and watched like your TEDx talk, which is awesome, and all these different things. And I was trying to consume all this in preparation for this. And somewhere in there's a phrase you use, like ambition gets you in the room, authenticity makes you irreplaceable. Right. And to that point, right. I'm
oh my God,
curious.
when did I say that? I remember, but I don't even know where that is now.
I'll look at my notes and tell you, find it for you. Right. But it grabbed me because I thought like, wow, of course she said this, right? Of what I know of you. I'm like, of course she said this because this is her. It's not your brand. It's literally just how you carry yourself. But I'm curious to kind of go back a step if we can for a second, because you say in your early concierge career, you stumbled into the opportunities and you lucked into like having great bosses and them letting you do your things. Like that's a whole industry that is essentially built on like scalable standards, processes, and literal uniforms.
Yes.
Right? Like, so how in that world, not just you, but like what's the lesson for other people that they could think about? Like how in that kind of a rigid space, your authenticity was what ultimately made you a great then in-person concierge in the lobby. Now concierge, digital remote, across the globe. Like,
so it's interesting. So I think, first of all, I'll say, I feel like it's changed. So in the sense that now, hospitality really is leaning more into that authenticity. And so they're letting employees be a little bit more of themselves. But there was a period of my career where I worked at a property. I don't need to say the name, but we could, but it is what it is. And I have a fantastic relationship, by the way, with all of the properties I've ever worked with. But at that time, they were so strict. They were so rigid. I had a real tough time working there. And I'm so grateful that I worked there because my gosh, it took my professionalism to the next level. But like I would sit in my car and cry before going home at times because I felt so stilted. And I was like, if you just let me be me, just trust, like I'll be amazing. But it was like, oh, you can only have your hair a certain way and like your pantyhose and this and that. And it's just like
all the stuff that's not important.
No, it really wasn't.
In delivering an incredible guest experience, a memorable guest experience.
And I remember being like taken aside by one of the general managers who was like, so I heard you wore your hair down and curly the other day. And I'm like, I guess so. Like, and they're like, well, we have to write you up for that because it's not part of our like grooming standards. And I'm like,
wow,
like what? Like, I'm just being a girl in my 20s and I wanted to wear my hair naturally curly one day. Like, how is that even legal? But like, and so it was very interesting. And then when I end up going from that property to the property that I was at the longest, and I will always say the reason why I was at the London West Hollywood for like 9 years. I was there for 9 years because they let me do what I wanted. And they knew, and they had trust in me that they're like, she knows the parameters in which to play. Like, let her just go and do it. And it wasn't just me. That was also kind of just how their managerial style was in general. Okay. And so people that had really great training at other hotels, whether they worked at Four Seasons, Peninsula, Ritz-Carlton, that had really in-depth training programs. Yeah. The people that went from those type of properties to this property did really well because they knew the basics. Now they didn't have somebody breathing over them. Whereas some of the people that like didn't have that formal training, they were a little bit like, I don't understand.
Sure. And I'd always be like maybe too much freedom and therefore, totally. and they didn't have the context.
Yeah. Exactly. And context. Exactly. So it is very interesting, but like, you know, you just have to lean into the personal side of things. And I do feel like in general, hospitality has become far more relaxed in that. Yeah. I mean, obviously you have to have standards. You have to have like, but yeah, I mean, oh my gosh.
But that authenticity, I mean, it's so deeply rooted and related to like a great person, one-on-one relationships or connection or experiences, right? So I mean, I guess there are people in the world who are so wealthy or whatever that when they travel, they care more about the button-down shirt and like, I guess there are people like that are super bougie, like old school elitists. But I would imagine that most people, especially people with money, like they want they don't like care less about that stuff. As 100%. Long as that stuff is the basics, but then they want that memorable. They want to literally feel seen and heard, loved, cared for, respected, treated well, like taken care of, right? And so I don't care if the girl has curly hair or straight hair, as long as she gets me and my family and my kids. And
there's the element of discretion, and then at the end of the day, it comes down to trust.
Yeah,
because it really is like if I think about like. I mean, I have a select group of private clients, and a lot of them I've either known and or worked with for 10 years now.
Sure.
And so there's an incredible level of trust with that. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day is that, especially in hospitality, like you have access to so much private information, just details. And there has to be this level of trust that like, you're going to do the right thing, even when somebody isn't looking and watching over your shoulder.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, huge.
No, I love that. You talk about in your TEDx talk, this idea of making, I don't want to like first impressions is what we used to call it, right? That's what my mom would refer to it. But this idea that in like the first 10 seconds of an interaction that you can like do things that can connect you with people or build that trust, as you say.
Sure.
So I'm curious if we frame that, especially today, because I think if I remember correctly, TEDx talk was like a year and a half ago, 2 years, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it was just about, I did it a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And then it came out just a little
about a year-ish ago. Right. Okay. So even from then, which doesn't seem like that long ago to now, right? Like, what are the things that we can do with each other as people in the first 10 seconds of an interaction that an algorithm is never going to be able to replicate?
Oh my gosh, it's so simple. It's so simple. It's like, it's about the things like eye contact. And like, I mean, it really comes down to like eye contact and engaging with somebody, just being present. I mean, that's honestly what it is, because then you get a read for somebody. Like we're constantly reading people, you know, we're doing this like scan over people, and you're getting an idea of like their sense and who they are. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times people like meet me and they're like, I can just tell you're like a really great person. And I'm like, you're my Uber driver. I'm in the back of a car. I'm exhausted. I just traveled 23 hours. I'm so glad you're picking up on my good vibes. But
right, exactly. But there's something to be said for that, right? It's the whole like,
totally.
You exude that which I guess you're thinking about, or that where your heart is, however you want to describe it, right? And if you're a good person, you're a good person. But
yeah, I mean, I think just it's like it's treating people with kindness, and it's like it's treating people like humans. You know, at the end of the day, it's just treating somebody like a human, and it's like whether just because somebody is doing a service for you does not make them a servant. And I think that's a very interesting thing that I also feel like that's actually kind of one of the reasons why the hospitality industry has been having such a challenge in recent years, is because I think there was a period of time where you would be in the service industry and you were treated like a servant, so to speak.
Sure.
You were just,
the number of, you were the help, right? Yeah.
I was absolutely treated like the help for quite some time when I worked at some of the different properties I worked at. And that's where I would have such a hard time because I'm like, but wait, I'm helping, but like, why are you treating me like a second class citizen when A, I'm probably like have a higher IQ than you. B, like, I'm just here helping you. I mean, those are all like, again, it's like in your 20-ish year old mind that you're trying to like understand. But if you think about even just like the nature of American US culture, it's such an individualistic culture.
Yes.
We're all about individuals, freedom. And then we're also now in an era of, whether it's millennials dominating the workforce, where like we were all told that we were special, which is fine. I'm not arguing against that. But in a work pool or talent pool of people that are like, but I'm special. They don't want to go into a job being like, oh, I'm just a servant or I'm just of help. So until we
those are jobs for the old guys like me who were told when we were kids, you are not special. You just fit in, buddy.
No, totally. So, but we are seeing this shift as far as that you can, again, have your uniqueness, have your specialness while you're still in these positions. And until we like really get everybody on board with it's like to be of service is actually incredibly rewarding and incredibly fulfilling. And it's not a demeaning thing to position to be in until we really get everybody on board with that. Then I feel like that's when we'll see a little bit more of the switch and the shift in the workforce and people kind of going back into that industry again, which by the way, those are not words that I've used ever to really kind of describe this, articulate this like in a public forum. So
fantastic. I'm doing my job. All right. One last question before we get to our closing segment question. This one's a bit more personal. Not revealing any secrets or anything here, but just make it think about you a little bit differently.
Yes.
Like the industry that you have plied your trade in, both in person and digitally, it's inherently temporary, right? Guests check in, they check out, right? The magical moment happens and then they leave. The magical place stays behind when you go home or when they go home, et cetera. There's always a new magical place in the next locale that you can go to. How has living for you individually, not as an entrepreneur or an employee, but just you as Sarah, like how has living a life that is structured around beautiful, fleeting moments kind of shaped the way that you view long-term relationships and like your own journey?
Oh, like long-term
Yeah, and this is not like a relationship, like romantic relate. This is just like because so much of, put in more simple terms, maybe for even my own benefit, like because so much of whom you interact with and how you interact with is like I'm here in this place and then I'm gone. Then the next week I'm in some other exotic place. And like because you're in the industry, like you have relationships with lots of these people you interact with. So there's like, I'm going back to this property and I'm interacting with these same people, or you have your core clients. But like a lot of your life, different property, different. We're doing a video here. We're filming this thing for this TV station. It like, has that affected you? Or again, does this go back to the roots of 8-year-old Sarah? Like, you've always had your people, you create your tribes where you go, and you believe it's all like, they're all out there for the taking. Like, I'm just curious, like, do you think differently about things that most people would consume, like, and think like, I gotta plant roots. I gotta stay in a community if I'm going to build long-term relationships or have long-term friendships, or like you've managed to live a life that is very much different than the average person. And I've just wondered like how that's colored your perspective on friendships, relationships, and your own journey.
Okay, so I have a lot to say to all of this.
Please. That's the longest question ever, by the way. Sorry about that.
I know. Because I was like, oh God, there's so much to say. Well, I say it's like, if you make it happen for the people that matter. I will say that. And it doesn't matter the distance. It doesn't matter the schedule. You make time happen for the people that matter. That is what that is. I will also say all of these wonderful, like when people ask me like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You're at home. Like my life at home is actually incredibly boring. It's like I work out, I go to the grocery store and I hang out with the people that are the most important to me. Because I get so many wonderful experiences when I'm out and about that like when I'm home, I just want the simple things. And I've always kind of been of that mindset that it's the simple things that matter. But if anything, in what I would see from working at the desk in these high-end hotels, what I've experienced in the life that I have, it really comes down. It just really is about the simple things. I also have been recently reminded a lot that, and I think traveling a lot does this, is that you really don't need that much stuff, you know? And one of the things that I am personally like struggling with, and I'll say, or I don't want to say struggling, but like I'm trying to wrap my brain around is like, I've always been a firm believer of like the home is the sacred place and space for me because I do travel around and it's like home, it's this, and it's gotta be this like rooted thing. And it's only now in this past year and I'm making some changes going into next year that I might be exploring maybe putting some stuff in storage and subletting in different cities.
Okay.
By the way, this is hot off the press. I haven't shared this with anybody like in publicly before. And that's a very hard concept for me. And people might be like, but you travel all over the place. Like, it's not that big of a deal. I'm
You're like, yeah, but at home I have my anchor and I know it's there.
And I always tell people, like, I would much rather come home for 24 hours than go on to the next destination. I got a wardrobe change. Like, I wear so many different types of things. Like, I do so many different roles. I got to change my suitcase. Literally. But B, it's a reset. And so for me, home is always that reset button. And it's so incredibly important. But yeah, so I mean,
I love that.
I think it's important to have balance, and everybody has different levels of balance in their life. And that is when I was kind of alluding to it earlier. I'm on the precipice of like leaning into some things that scare me. And that, for example, that concept.
That's part of it.
Scares me because I'm like, oh my gosh, that doesn't feel very settled. I like to be settled.
And what's fascinating is like, even there's like a dichotomy in your answer, right? So if we had edited out the second part and just leaned into the first part, someone could come in and listen to that and think like, oh, okay, so she's managed to figure out how one can live a very rich, fulfilled, stable life, rootless. Right? Like with
but I haven't. I've always had a root.
Well, but that's just it, right? So then that's the second part of the answer. Then it's like, oh, wait, no, she also is she does deeply value like the base of the tree and wherever it is. And she has the relationships that are like the people that matter most, as you said, you make time for them and they could be anywhere because they're connected to your heart. They travel with you. But you do have a part of you that is like about the physical space and your space and your stuff. And so now that you're contemplating like maybe doing that part differently, like, holy cow, that is of course frightening and
it would
exciting.
Be, I mean, it would be temporary and it's like, but again, isn't it like, I mean, and it's showing like, I mean, we always talk ourselves through this. It's like sometimes the thing that scares you the most is something that you really need to do. And I'm like, this is terrifying. And it's like, I've done a couple of terrifying things in the past couple of years, but I'm like, you always land on your feet. And that's, I think, the biggest reminder is like, just do the terrifying thing. Yeah. Like, just do it because you will land on your feet. You will.
I love it.
Like, that's just how gravity works.
I love it. All right. Last question for you. Closing segment question. This is a little bit more actionable kind of takeaway question for folks that are listening. Tap back into Sarah, the travel industry expert, right? So whether people are traveling for business or traveling for leisure nowadays, 2026, like what are the absolutely like key 2 or 3 things that every traveler needs to be either doing in their planning or like paying attention to when planning their travels or experiences?
I think some of this is kind of almost like never really changed.
Yeah.
I think the key thing is like to just like have be flexible. Just be flexible and like open-minded and like things are not going to go as planned. But put out there like it's going to work out, but like know that, okay, it's not. So maybe you need to have a plan B or at least have thought out like, okay, what could a plan B be?
Yeah.
Also and like, so whether you have to build in buffer time for your trips in case like a flight gets delayed, if you really need to be there, say for a wedding or this or that.
Happening more nowadays, it seems lately.
Totally. Yeah. But then also like understanding like when things don't go how they're supposed to go. I always like to say this is like, look for what ends up happening instead. Because I think that flips it. Because so often we're like, oh my God, I didn't make it home on time. Or, oh, I really wanted to do this. Or that the museum that I've been dying to go to isn't open. But then it's like, because you didn't do that, what did you end up doing? Okay. And I think that just reframes all of it. I mean, by the way, this is like life advice, right? Because how often do things go our own way? But like in today's world, I mean, things are changing. It's constantly dynamic. And so it's like, you just kind of like, you roll with it. And then that ability to be flexible and to just roll with the punches, you bring that skill home with you and you apply it to your career, your job, your personal life, whatever that is. And I think that ability to be flexible, I mean, it's such a skill that is so, underrated that it's something super important. And then to the final one, in a time where things are more and more expensive, just get creative and or prioritize whatever you have to do in order to travel. So whether it is use points, whether it is plan ahead, whether it is, I don't know, just to get creative, but like, don't, I had this conversation actually with my mom a lot because she'll talk about, she's like, oh, that's too expensive. I'm like, no, I don't want the idea that something is like too expensive to hold me back from experiencing it. Like the money will come back. And I mean, obviously within reason. It's like, you know what I mean? But it's like, but it's like, I hate the idea that like within reason that there's certain like limitations. Like just stop limiting yourself and just being like, it's going to happen and it's going to work out. And it's amazing how when you have that attitude, how the universe like conspires to just make stuff happen for you.
Make a plan, but leave a space in that plan for the serendipity of the moment and the experience, right? You never know where it might take you, who it might seat you next to, what it might result in.
Oh my gosh, the number of people I've met on planes and in lounges and like all that stuff. I mean, it's fantastic. I love it.
Quick finishing story, just because he'll love the shout out and you'll appreciate the connectedness of all this. So we have we call you guys alumnus of the show once you've been a guest on the show, because we don't believe these are transactional conversations.
Yeah.
We believe these are long-term relationships. So we have 2 alumnus of our show who are a husband and wife who I knew the husband before I ever met the wife, and they met on an airplane. Like literally at a time in his life when he was eagerly looking for love and all the right places or wrong places, I guess, at the time in his life in Los Angeles. And she was on a flight, and he literally, the story he told on the podcast, which then she told her version of it on a later episode when she came on talking about her business, because she's a wildly successful entrepreneur and product designer. He's a sportscaster, and author, but he spied her from like two steps on the plane. Like as he was, and he said, he kept telling himself like, oh my God, I hope my seat is next to her. I hope that's next to her. And his seat wound up being next to her. And then he goes on to tell about how she ignored him for like the first hour and a half of their 3-hour flight. And then he basically just belittled her and like pushed her, poked her, prodded her enough to get her to pay attention to him. And the rest is history, as they say.
I love that. Well, yes. I mean, time will tell to see what ends up happening. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people that you get to meet out in the wild, so to speak.
If you're out there, and yes, you have a plan, but especially nowadays with cancellations and travel problems and FAA and weather and all that's like, be flexible. And you'll probably be nicer to the concierge that you meet at the hotel desk when you get there at 2 a.m. and you're tired and you're angry and you're frustrated. Like if you're just more flexible and more open-minded and a little bit creative, like your whole experience probably winds up being better. And people who then are there to help you in the service industry at every step along the way probably can be more helpful to you if you're less angry and belligerent.
I will leave it like with this final thing. I will say this: in all my years of working with people, the people that are constantly worried that bad things will happen or have a negative attitude towards stuff, negative and bad things always happen to them. Exactly. And the people, and I have some clients of mine and friends who just are so happy-go-lucky, and I'm like, they literally are floating through life and everything works out in their favor. And so if you can just remember that, I mean, I know I work with people that it's like, I know part of my role is, it's like, they're like, well, what happens if like this flight gets delayed?
Of course.
Like, you're right. The flight could get delayed, but we're not going to put that out there. And they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. And it's like, yeah,
good for you.
And it's like, if you're just nice and it's amazing and you roll with it, it's amazing. Everything will work out in your favor in one way or another.
Good life advice as from the TEDx author TEDx talker. Come on. We couldn't just talk travel stuff. We had to make it about life advice. That was awesome. All right. So as we close, this is a blast. It's honestly, it's exactly what I expected us to have. This kind of a conversation. You're amazing. You're awesome energy. You do lead your way through life with an infectious smile. And you're obviously the consummate pro at what you do, which I always say, when someone is so good at what they do and they've put in the thousands and thousands of hours of work to be good at it, that allows the natural version of themselves to come out. right?
Totally.
The authentic person is allowed to come free and you get to be you. So I really enjoyed it. Also, like, picked up a ton of kind of really interesting context on the world we live in and the travel industry of it all and the kind of experiences of it all. So I'm really grateful for that. How can people find you or follow you online, websites, social media, whatever you want to mention
All of
here?
the above.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm pretty much Ask A Concierge on every social media platform. LinkedIn, I am my name, Sarah Dandashy. We've got my website, which is askaconcierge.tv. But you name it, come find me online, send a note. I check all of my DMs. So I'll get back to you. So, but yeah,
Awesome.
definitely connect because there's always fun new content coming out.
Something going on always. This is great. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And as always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was produced by our team at the Storytellers Company in Mexico City and Los Angeles. And you can always find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our show as found on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite podcast by searching Entrepreneurial Thinkers with Rob Ryan. You can also follow along on our various social media platforms for clips and contents at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And if you'd like to connect with me, our host, you can find me just about anywhere on social under the handle I am Rob Ryan. Thanks, and have a great day.